Welcome to the Golden Age of Cardboard podcast, where we remember a time when stacks of cards were held together with rubber bands and Mickey mantles were put in bike spokes. We hope you will enjoy and reminisce as you come along with us as we tell stories about the baseball cards from the Golden Age of Baseball. We will examine the state of the vintage baseball card market and talk to some of the greatest collectors in the hobby. You won't be hearing us talk about any chrome or shiny cards here. Now, to take you on this retrospective journey, here's your host, direct from the shallow end of the gene pool, my son, Mike Moynihan.
Yo and hello everybody, Mike here. Yep, it's me. I am back. I was on a brief hiatus. I'm coming back a little bit sooner than I had expected to, but the reality is I have a really fun episode in store for you guys today. I want to give a quick thanks to the guys that guest hosted for me over the last number of weeks. I appreciate all the guys DMing me on Instagram or wherever, just saying, can't wait till you're back. And here we are. Mid-December, we're getting close to Christmas, and I have the opportunity to talk to a gentleman today that personally I admire a lot in the hobby and what he does. I love that he's a collector, and it's none other than Nat Turner, who is the president and CEO of Collectors of PSA. And y'all know me, I'm a PSA homer, not going to lie. So I'm super excited to have this discussion. And here we go. I'm going to bring Nat on and we will start talking. Hey, Nat, how you doing, man?
Hey, I enjoyed that intro. I was laughing.
That really is my dad.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
You've done hundreds of interviews. This will be, you're going to end up saying this was the funnest I've ever had because
it might be. Yeah. Well, my heart is in the vintage and 90s basketball. Those are my two. And unfortunately, there aren't that many podcasts in 90s basketball. So this is a vintage. I'm excited to talk about vintage for sure.
I'm going to try to hit on one of your sweet spots, right?
Yeah.
If we're not talking about that. Again, I feel like I'm under a lot of pressure here, Nat. So have patience with me because I feel like I'm representing a lot of the vintage world that gravitates towards PSA as their kind of slab of choice, let's say. Most collectors are like me. I don't like a Frankenstein collection. I want everything to be the same. And although I respect what some other grading companies do, and it's not a knock on them, it's just more, I made my bed with PSA 15 years ago and I'm lying in it, and I enjoy the continuity of having PSA slabs in my collection. And so I feel like there's a lot of guys that are loyal to PSA, and we'll talk about PSA later, but the reality is I want to talk to you now. And for most of this, just about you. Tell me a little bit about your collecting history. And for those that don't know, how long you've been doing cards and all that stuff.
Yeah. I'm a huge collector. Cards. I have been for a very long time. For as far as my age, most of my life. So I started collecting when I was probably 5 or 6 years old. I grew up in Texas, Louisiana, places like that. And the Braves, my dad's from Atlanta. So my Braves were his team. And I grew up also like overseas. We moved around a lot. And the Braves were the consistent thing for me because you could watch them on TBS. And Hank Aaron was my dad's favorite player. And we sent 3 baseballs. I have a sister. We sent 3 baseballs, one for my dad, one for me, one for my sister, to Hank Aaron when we were living overseas. And Hank Aaron sent all 3 back signed. I have mine right here.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then when I was in 2nd grade, my dad gave me these 2 exact cards.
Okay.
You recognize these?
75 and 76 tops.
Number 1, yeah. That pretty much got me started in card collecting. So I started collecting baseball cards. This was like 1992, 93. I kind of lost interest in baseball in 96 only because of the steroid stuff was, later on, like in the late 90s, but then Kobe, and so we were in Houston by that point. We won the championship after Jordan retired for a couple of years right before that. Started picking up basketball, but then in about 2009, 10, I started getting really into vintage baseball, or I'd say back into it a little bit. My dad had a collection, which wasn't so great, the bike spoke cards and the whole thing. But I started buying, frankly, just randomly on eBay. I saw like, PSA 752 Topps Willie Mays. Like these were not, and the cards were, 1/10 of what they're worth now.
Sure.
And so, but I was buying just the cards that I liked and that I recognized, from when I was a kid, because we'd go to card shows and shops and all that. But yeah, so I was a card dealer basically in a high school and middle school. And I never stopped, like through college until now. Like, I've gone up and, I've really got into collecting LeBron James in 2003. Mickey Mantle, I started going big on in like 2010. I do player collections and then I do sets. So I have a lot of sets. I'm doing like in baseball, I'm doing like 59 Topps, 54 Bowman, which we talked about before the show. 75 Topps and Topps Mini are my two probably most coveted sets. I just finished 1915 Cracker Jack, a bunch of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, Cracker Jack's no joke.
Yeah. It's not I bought a complete set, but it was unfortunately broken up a little bit. I've been trying to buy back the originals. I'll explain in a minute if you want. It's a super.
Yeah, go ahead. Just go now.
Well, it's a sequentially cert numbered set. So a guy, as I'm sure you could get that set as a redemption back then.
Right.
And in fact, hold on, I have it.
Okay.
Yeah, give me one sec. Yeah, so back in the day, if you sent in for the redemption, you would be sent back the complete set in this binder.
Okay.
If you could see the logo and everything.
I can. Yeah, that's fantastic.
And if you open it up, it's super fragile. It has little pocket squares or corner pockets and it says manager, third baseman. So anyway, whoever had this set for many years sent it into PSA at one time, and every card was sequentially cert numbered. And most of them pretty low grade, but they're really cool. The instead of like a bright red, they're almost like a maroon, like a purple, whatever ink they were using that day. So anyway, I'm basically but he upgraded like 10 or 15 of them and unfortunately sold the originals. So I'm like slowly trying to buy back the originals from that submission.
So you're hoping they show up on the registry somewhere and somebody.
Yeah, in the registry, I use Card Ladder alerts. I'm on obviously Heritage and Memory Lane and REA and all the sites every time an auction opens. I've actually found 2 or 3 of them. So yeah, but the registry is the best place for it because you can go in and just search by the cert number on someone's set. So
if you lived overseas a lot growing up, you didn't get to go to a lot of card shows and stuff growing up, did you?
Yeah. So I lived over there for 6 years.
Okay.
For those 6 years, it was nothing. And when we moved back to Louisiana, that's when I started hitting card shows again. Yeah.
Do you like the card show environment? Is that a fun place for you? Like, is that a happy place?
The National is my Super Bowl. I love it. I've been going for years before PSA, before collectors. The local shows are hit or miss. Like for me, like what I collect, which is vintage baseball and 90s basketball, those are my 2 big things. To be honest, you don't see a lot of it, of both of those things where I go, at least in the New York area. You see a lot of ultra modern basketball and football and baseball cards, which I just don't collect. And that's fine. Like, that's the next generation or whatever. The National though, I'm doing a bunch of sets. It's somewhat obnoxious, but like most of my sets, I'm doing in like higher grade. Like you don't go into a show in Westchester County in a Marriott ballroom and find a PSA 10 1975 Topps card.
Sure.
Even though they're a couple $100, like, it's just not something you typically see. So, but the National, is certainly a lot. I like this, not every show. Actually the low end shows I like, I bring meaning like small, I bring my kids and, they love, cause they collect like Pokemon and like all this stuff that I'll never understand.
Exactly.
Yeah. So,
yeah, I mean, to me, the show experience has been fundamentally the same for 30 years, right? I mean,
yeah,
there's been more bells and whistles added to nationals and things like that. But the reality is the basic show experience is relatively unchanged.
yeah.
And that's kind of cool that, you get dealer has a table and they got a bunch of cards. You look through and see if there's something you like. I can see how the national
Wi-Fi. If they could have Wi-Fi that worked and air conditioning, I think we'd be in a better place.
right. Good point. Good point. So you love the national. Do you wish the national would move around a little more, or do you like the rotation it's currently on in terms of location?
I wish it was in Chicago every year, maybe Dallas as well. I'm not a huge fan of Atlantic City. We had one of our affiliates employees get beat up on the boardwalk after one evening. So like and it was bound to happen. I mean, it's just not a conducive place to, have a lot of valuable cards and, things, in your pocket. And well, I don't know, it just didn't feel safe. And it wasn't. I think Chicago is better. I think they have issues with this convention center, like I said, with Wi-Fi and air conditioning. That was pretty brutal last year.
It was.
This past. I don't know. I think Cleveland will be fine. I mean, we've been there before, but I just think it should be more. In my opinion, I have no say in the matter, but I would love them to pick a great spot and it just happened. I think doing it West Coast is tough because then all the East Coasters. It's hard. Like, I just kind of think you stick to Chicago down to Dallas and just, play nice for everybody. Like AC, like tons of my buddies in the hobby from West Coast didn't go.
Yeah. Same here. Yeah. Same here. They're like, yeah, I'm not, no thanks.
Yeah.
Dallas would be great for me. That's basically my backyard. So, and Dallas is more of a mecca for the hobby than I think people realize.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on here.
Well, the Dallas shows are solid. Have
you been to a Dallas show before?
I have, yeah. Okay. For basketball cards, this is a few years ago now, but it was solid for basketball. I mean, like 90s basketball, there's quite a lot of dealers there, friends of mine who go. But I mean, Houston would be good. I mean, Dallas is better, but I mean, Houston, you got where I used to have a booth at the George R. Brown Center down there. They used to have I think it was a TriStar show. Maybe
TriStar show. Yeah, twice a year they do a TriStar show.
Yeah,
they only do it once a year now in February. But
yeah, I don't think maybe that's not big enough for the national, but it's pretty big. But anyway, yeah, that's my opinion on the national.
Yeah, I mean, it's the other shows, like you said, and this is true for me. If I go to even a Dallas show, which is a lot of modern, ultra modern, right? I'm only really stopping at 20% of the booths, maybe, that have vintage, and it's very easy to see on a table. You look and you're like, yep, not for me, not my kind of stuff, and you just move on. But I'm excited. I'm going to try to go to Strongsville this year.
Oh, cool!
Coming next year, which is a all vintage show, right? And that
I've never been. Yeah,
I think that would appeal. I'm starting to travel more to do shows just because I want to experience all these things. I went to Burbank this year in February. I guess technically Ontario. See what they're doing. That was a good show. It was fun. I've been to Chantilly and nationals and stuff, but so vintage baseball. Let's get into some vintage baseball because Hank Aaron, your dad's favorite player, which is awesome and not surprising. He was pretty amazing. So have you done the Hank Aaron run in honor of your dad kind of thing?
I'm trying. Yeah. So I'm doing, again, it's obnoxious, but like, I have this thing. I just I try and get 10s and it's so freaking expensive and like impossible. But, so I go down the 9s a lot, obviously. So yeah, I have an Aaron from every year, 54 through 76. I'm not doing the like all-star cards yet, or like I have the 76 one and a 10 because it's one of the first, and those are pretty achievable. But yeah, I mean, I don't have a 10 in all of them, obviously. I have the rookie, which I'll show you, which is my favorite card in my entire collection. And then my other favorite would probably be the 5610, which is awesome. Okay. Yeah, but then I have the 5910 and the 75 and a 9. The 75 is a 9. I don't think there's a 10 still. The last card 660, which I actually bought at the Westchester show that I was making fun of a minute ago. but a guy who's not a friend of mine walked up to me. I was asking dealers about 75s, and he came up to me and he's like, "Hey, I have this," and he didn't even have a booth. I just bought it from him on the show floor. But I have one of every card, but it's not a. I'm trying to upgrade them, over time. Oh, my favorite, Aaron, other than the rookies, I have the 75 mini 10. That's
nice.
like one of my favorite cards. So, yeah.
Is there a decade that you kind of gravitate towards, 50s, 60s, 70s, kind of in that vintage era?
Probably 50s. I mean, I think they're just so damn expensive now. Like I can't, I mean, it's, I tried to do a 52 set and I gave up. I wanted to do 8s and 9s. It's just hilarious how hard that is. Unless you buy a set. I think the 50s are just, it's so hard to beat the designs every single year. 60s to me, I love, I would say like 1 year, like 62, I think is just such a cool design, but like, I'm not a huge fan of like 63, 64, 65, like the designs of them. I mean, like they don't like speak to me that well. 70s, I think are super cool. I really love 71 and 75. Not really the other. I mean, look, I like them all. I'm just saying the ones that like really stand out to me are the ones I just said. But 50s, like there's pretty much every single year, including Bowman, are just awesome.
To me, 53 was the best year they ever made cards.
Yeah.
Between the top.
My favorite set in 50s is 54.
Okay. Yeah, love it.
Yeah. But I love 59.
Bowman,
See, I love 54 Bowman. I don't know. It's just to me like the cursive letter. It's such a cool design. I've opened a few packs. I don't know. I think I think 59 with the colors, starting in 58 with the color backs, like it's just so color blocks behind, like it's so tough to beat. And I remember reading a story about 59 when someone opened a box like on an airplane what do you call it? Tray table. And then, but anyway, yeah. So like, for example, here, I just brought this to show you. Here's a 54 Bowman unopened box.
Oh my
God. Nickel packs.
I think everybody has one of those.
Well, this one's interesting. If you want the story, like a friend of mine, who knows nothing about cards, knew I collected cards. And he's like, "Hey, I've got this woman who works for me. She says her husband has some cards, that he might sell." I'm like, all right. 99.9% of the time, it's nothing. The guy's really elderly. He's like 85. I get on the phone with him. He doesn't know how to text message or email. He's an awesome guy. He knew how to email, but he was like, I was texting with him. He's like, just call me. And he's like, yeah, I got some boxes. I was like, what boxes do you have? He's like, well, I think I have a 54 Bowman pack, at least a pack. I was like, oh, wow, that's awesome. And then he calls me like a few days later. He's like, actually, it's a whole box. I was like, what? And he had it. He bought it at a card show in like, I don't know, decades ago. And it was in his bank and he had to go get it. And anyway, he was in Lexington, Kentucky. Was that where it was? Yeah. I flew down, grabbed it, gave him money, flew up to Indiana, gave it to Steve Hart to confirm. Yeah. And then went back. It basically told him it was great. Everything passed. And yeah, it was like the coolest thing I've ever seen. But anyway,
that stuff still is out. It's just crazy that stuff exists, right? That you can find that stuff. A dude knows a dude who knows a dude, right? And
thank God I like took it seriously,
right. That's crazy. Although I found a few of those at Walmart the other day. I was looking for cards.
Yeah,
there were a few of those lying around. I passed on them. That's interesting. So, like I like 1960 tops for some reason. I love that, even though it's horizontal and that can be annoying. But the 62, it's like you said, they're all good, right? It's not a question of I hate any of them.
No, yeah.
Some of them, I kind of dig. I like the 65 actually.
There's 60 wax.
Nice.
I think Yaz is on. Is he on one of them? I don't remember. But
that's in it for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think 62. I just love 62. I have those boxes over there too. I just think it's so cool, the design. I don't mind the horizontal nature. I love that about 56. I just also love how they had a front, like 54 as well. They had the portrait and then they had an action behind it.
Yep.
Pretty intricate design, like when you think about it. And they got a little lazy, I would argue, in the 60s.
No doubt.
Yeah. And like the oil paintings, in the 50s, like how do you beat that? Like 53, you're right on. Like I've seen the Willie Mays oil painting from 53, like so cool.
It's a great year. So when you have unopened wax like that, is it any temptation at all to crack it?
So yes, but on the big stuff, no. Like I would never consider opening these. What I do sometimes open is I have them over here. I'll bring them if you want. I have one of my favorite sets on the registry is I have a pack run from 51 through 89 tops. And when I was upgrading, like if I had a PSA 68 pack, for example, I'd, have a glass of wine and be like, screw it. let's see what's in there. And I did buy once 20 54 Bowman. These are the why I love Bowman, 54 Bowman. I had 20 packs, I think it was. It was a partial box someone found, and they graded each pack, and I bought all of them. And I opened one day, like one of the crappiest ones. It had like a coffee stain on it. It was like, and it was awesome. I think, who did we get? We got Campanella.
Oh, great card.
Yeah. And, like I got hooked on it, but so anyway, yes. And I've opened some 70s boxes. I've never opened a 69 box or 60s box, or 50s, but I only have a couple. But I've opened 75 mini, 3 or 4 of them. I submitted every single card in 75 mini. I got 0 10s.
Wow.
So I was like, all right, this is, I'm not going to open these anymore. And then I opened a 73 box and a 74 box. Same thing. No 10s. I was like, all right, I'm done.
Quality control. I mean, that just shows why they're valuable, why they have so much value. Because you can open a brand new pack today that's never seen the light of day since 1973 or whatever.
Yeah.
And you're like, they're all miscut.
You get smoked. Yeah.
I don't mind miscut cards a lot because that's how they made it that way. It's not like they, not intentionally necessarily, but I can live with, to me, registration is the most important thing on a card. Yeah. If the picture doesn't look right and it's not in focus and no snow and that kind of thing, that's the focus of the card anyway, is the image of the player, right? So to me, that's where I gravitate. Who doesn't love what I want all my cards to be greatly, all that stuff, right? But at the same time, you go, okay, you get this beautiful card, sharp corners, and it's a little off center, out of the factory, out of the pack that way. I can find myself living with that sometimes. Sorry, I get
no, I'm with you. I'm totally with you. Yeah, centering doesn't bother me as much. Like when I'm pulling cards, for me, like 75 mini, like to me, it's color and I mean, first of all, that set's like the most colorful set out there, right?
And fish eyes on that set are really bad, right?
I pulled a Brett. I'll never forget. I thought it was a 10, centering everything, and it had a fish eye to the right of it was top right corner. And I was looking it over. I was like, I thought it was, and this is way before we bought Collectors and Casse, and I wasn't as astute at knowing all the imperfections and spotting them, and I submitted it and got an 8, and I was devastated. But it was, and I got it reviewed at the National, and like they pointed it out. I was like, it was such a bummer. But
that's there are common issues with certain years, right? That are well known in the hobby, and you guys don't really. I guess I'll ask the question: is that taken into consideration?
We don't curve cards, based on their, like another example with 75 is like the paper was this recycled paper that Topps used that year. I'm sure you familiar. And like you get these little bumps and rises in some of that paper, right? And yes, that's super common with 75, but the standard of card grading, like that's an imperfection. So, but because that's, part of the stock of 75 doesn't mean we're going to ignore it.
51 Bowman wax stains on dang near every card. It just kind of is what it is. I actually agree with not bending the standards just because you have a known, let's just call it corporate product defect, right?
Yeah.
That you don't like, hey, a card is a 10 or 9 or whatever grade. If it meets these standards, if it doesn't, it isn't, period paragraph. So, all right, I got some more some more collecting questions for you. Before collectors, and you were just a dude like the rest of us, right? And what made you gravitate towards PSA as your grading company of choice?
Yeah. So actually, I have it here. This was the first card I ever graded. It was
a BGS 9.5.
Yeah, Steve Francis. Steve Francis was my favorite rookie in 1999.
Hey, he's a Houston great.
There you go. Yeah, well, and that's where we were at the time. So Houston, Beckett, basketball, like Beckett was everything to me as a because they're in Dallas and I still have tons of Beckett cards, to be clear, and I respect them and the brand and Dr. Beckett and everything. For me, actually, it was because of baseball, vintage baseball. When I started buying vintage baseball in 2010, I was exposed to the set registry, the PSA set registry. And prior to that, I'd been building this BGS 9.5 LeBron rookie set. I wanted one of every, and I had some really good, still great friends who we competed for every BGS 9.5 LeBron rookie in parallel, and starting in 03 and still even yesterday I traded him. I bought a PSA 10 from him because he doesn't do PSA, and I'm helping him get some of my Beckett ones. But 20 years later, it's funny. So anyway, I started doing the vintage baseball set registry stuff, and I didn't really think PSA knew modern cards. I just thought of it as a vintage baseball card grading company, just as a mainly basketball collector right up until then. And the set registry really opened my eyes. And then I discovered on there that there are sets for LeBron and Michael Jordan. But the biggest thing for me, which was like 2015, was, which is not an issue with vintage baseball as much, is authenticity. Let's just call them like nuances with 90s basketball, which is arguably probably my most important passion in cards for me. I mean, like if I had, if this room was burning down, I would take the 54 Aaron with me in the vintage baseball first, but just from a value perspective. But, I get a huge smile on my face when I open a box of 97 Topps Chrome, for example.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of fake cards in the 90s because the values have risen, and starting with the Fleer bankruptcy in 2006 or whenever it was, so many sheets and all this stuff got out. And again, you have these issues with like 70s baseball and 80s, but, fake serial numbers and all this stuff. And PSA was the company that really invested a lot into, way before we got here, into bringing on the right experts and understanding that forget grade, just is the card real? And I got burned on like 2 or 3 big cards that weren't in PSA holders that like I spent, for me at the time, like 10% of my wealth on that, 5 minutes later, oh, it's fake or trimmed or whatever. And it just, look, I'm not saying PSA is perfect by any means, but it was just a personal situation where I was like, not, that's the whole point of it, is to get it right. And worst of all, there wasn't a buyback for it. So I still have them. They're sitting right over here. So anyway, that's my little sob story. So I switched to PSA pretty hard in 2015. So
well, the landscape in the time I've been doing graded cards, I was a huge opponent of graded card. I thought it was silly.
Yeah.
Then I started doing some registries, and I started going deeper and to get into more expensive cards. And my biggest motivation for buying graded cards was the authenticity part of it, that aspect. And there was a time, you remember this, is based on the timeline you've been telling me, there was a time when each of the 3 big grading companies were known for a certain niche, right?
Yeah.
SGC was mainly pre-war people.
Pre-war tobacco cards,
SGC, right? The golden age in baseball, 50s, 60s, that was all PSA. And then Beckett did everything that came out of a pack.
Right.
And Beckett was like the big deal Holyfield in the room for a long time in the grading, years have passed. And that landscape has transformed, I think, quite a bit. It's been cool to watch and observe that. And the reality, again, I was so heavily invested into just PSA because that's higher pops, right? So for me, in the, let's say whenever this was, the early 2010s, right? If I wanted a 54 Bowman Roy Campanella, there were just a lot more options available in a PSA slab, period, paragraph. And so I wanted the most choices. If I went with another grading company, whether BVG, which I don't know, they're like tanks, right? The slabs, I didn't like them. SGC was fine, but it was like wasn't as consistent. So I couldn't find as many. So that was a huge part of it for me. But that authenticity piece that you're talking about, one of the questions I got from one of my buddies as I was prepping for this, asking some guys that I respect in the vintage world, like, what would you ask him? You know, talking about my interview with you here, my discussion with you. And for almost all of us, it's like the authenticity piece matters a lot. Like, look, numerical grade might be subjective, but it's not subjective. Is it real or not real?
I'm with you. Totally with you. Yeah.
And so
that's a binary thing. You have to get it right.
That's right. And I feel like if I buy a PSA slab, I'm getting, again, is it flawless? No, of course not. Nothing is when you have the human element involved, but I feel like I'm getting a real card when I buy a PSA slab, that it's a true XYZ Topps card, Bowman card, whatever it might be. So I appreciate that. What steps do you guys, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No.
What do you guys do? What is the process, as much as you can divulge to me, of going, yep, this is a real 52 Topps card, like first and foremost at the base level?
Yeah. There's so much. And first thing I'll say, we have a grade guarantee, and the biggest, or I'd say the most black and white aspect of the grade guarantee is authenticity, which means if the card ends up being fake and we graded it, as long as you're not the original submitter, we buy it back at market value. And I think we've spent multiple millions of dollars this year buying cards back, just this calendar year. And
wait, sorry, you said something there, a caveat that I want to not just gloss over. You said as long as you weren't the original submitter, and I didn't know that rule, but if I submit a card, let's say I go buy a raw card at a show, and I'm like, yeah, it looks good, it smells right, all the things, and I submit it, and it comes and you grade it, and then I find out later it's fake. I don't get my money. I'm just curious. That's
no, because you're not a victim, right? You were the one who submitted the card.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah, because it's basically trying to exclude those. Because we had people who try and, what's the right word? Like game the guarantee, where prior to they would knowingly submit fake or cards, and then hey, you need to buy this back. We're like, hey, well, you're the one who submitted it, and so that's but it's the victim. If you bought it on eBay, you're truly out of that money. It's that's when it applies.
And it's already slab. You can't put it under the same unless you crack it, and then you've really screwed yourself, right? So,
but by the way, just to be clear, very few people are the original submitter at this point. These
sure.
So it's that doesn't really come in that often, but it sometimes does in the 90s stuff because that stuff's still being discovered. But
well, I threw you off your game there.
No. I remember the question. Yeah. So we have basically experts in all these different categories. So we have a vintage team, we've got a Pokemon team, we've got a 90s basketball team, and it starts with our experts. Like at the end of the day, they're paid to be experts and to get it right, starting with authenticity, binary, yes or no. And we have a plethora of institutional knowledge, both in their heads, but more importantly, written down, where when a card comes in, we actually do run it through a series of, I would say, like a research team or grading team and our V1 team. So 3 teams are looking at it, and we have raw images of accurate, of real cards that we've confirmed, like golden data set. And on the screen, it has those cards there. So if for whatever reason someone's not paying attention, whatever, there are alerts that say, hey, look for this, look for that. And we are constantly building that database, that content, as we learn, because we see new fakes and all that all the time. And we have a whole grading alerts team that is basically keeping up to date with what we're seeing. And it, just in case, our human grader doesn't, recognize something, the system's there as a safety net to really protect. And one thing that we've launched maybe a month ago now, which is super cool, is actually AI testing for counterfeits. We're not doing it for grading. People have asked me that on Twitter. We're not AI grading cards, except numerically. But we are using AI for, is the card real or not? And we back tested it against our cards where we have images of them, which is not forever, unfortunately. Dates back only about 2 years since we've been taking images of graded cards that we grade. And we caught 250 cards that we should have failed, but unfortunately passed, that are out there in the wild. And we have since deactivated those cert numbers and are hoping that whoever currently owns them contacts us and allows us to buy them back. First, we'll make sure that the system got it right, of course, because the system, no software is 100%. But now we have this basically, computer safety net even further. So it's not just content, but it's also a proactive. Hey, this card, the system flags, the team logo's off, whatever it is, and that's pretty cool. So yeah, it's pretty complicated. Like I said, this is the most black and white thing. Like if you can't get authenticity right, what the hell are you doing, right?
Right.
So that's where a lot of our attention goes for sure. So.
I don't know if I speak for the whole vintage world out there. I'm sure I don't, but my opinion on that is I'm glad to see the especially on the authenticity part, because like you said, you got to get that right. The marriage of technology and the human element to go, okay, if it passes the smell test, for lack of a better word, human wise, and the AI says, yeah, it's good. What else can you do? I mean, at the end of the day, you're like, okay, we've done everything we can possibly do. The mechanics of that are interesting to think about, how a computer would determine. It could go down to the pixel, right? I mean, it can go down, not the printing process, like literally print dot by print dot. So it can be significantly more accurate than a human can probably be. So I actually think that's a welcome. I would go, yes, keep doing that. That's a great.
Yeah. And it's not something we want, like people shouldn't even care about that. The point, I mean, like, when they get their card back, all that matters is when they're buying the card or they're submitting a card that it's right. How you get to that answer is our job, frankly, behind the curtain, right? As I joked
Yeah.
And that's fine.
You want to know that it's been put through the test. Like it's been like, hey man, we're really sure this is a real card, right?
Yeah. And again, our grade guarantee, like if we get it wrong, we're buying it back. So
right.
It's cheaper for us to do the R&D, and get it right the first time. So
very cool. That was a huge thing, talking about authenticity. Because again, as a vintage guy, I started with PSA because I loved it. Now I want to get into the registry because just like you, the registry is crack cocaine. Okay.
Yeah, for me,
for card dude, for me too. And once I went down that rabbit hole, I enjoyed it on multiple levels. And I guess this is kind of like unwelcome feedback. I don't know, but I love obviously the simplicity of the checklist, right? Okay, you have a checklist, right? As collectors, we're all completionists and like, okay, I want to do this checklist because I like all the cards in it or whatever. And so then there's so many different thousands and tens of thousands of registries you can do. And the user has an opportunity to create like, hey, I want to set with the greatest players from this team in this era. And you guys will do that, and the fact that we feel like we, the collector, feel like we have some say in that, I guess is pretty cool. Do you worry about that exclusivity of the registry that makes it so powerful right now in the hobby being usurped down the road by anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, look, only the paranoid survive, right? Like we think about every other grading company, but also ones that don't exist, but not in a vacuum way where it's like, what are they doing? We focus on the collector and what they want first. And look, I'll be honest, the set registry has been underinvested in by us for years, way before we got here too, but even since. And like, it's still like our CTO is so mad, I'm sure, because like every day I'm like, set registry's down, like, can't add my orders to my sets, trying, that takes forever. I'm sure you do this. Like when you're adding the cert numbers, you click add, it's like a solid 30 seconds. Like there's stability issues galore in that thing. it's scary to imagine this, but it's still being run off of a server in a closet. And so we are rebuilding it. First and foremost, think of it like a house. Like we're starting with the foundation next to it. We're not going to tear the house down yet. We're building a foundation next door, and then we're going to start from the ground up. You can't renovate a bathroom in a crappy house with bad plumbing and bad everything, right? So we're rebuilding Set Registry next door, and then we're going to port over the furniture, right? All the sets and the content once it's on a stable foundation that won't crash. And then we're going to do renovations. Like, for example, the Set Registry needs to be much more visual. We get that a lot, with regards to inclusion of images of the cards. Helping people discover sets is really tough. You have to know what you want to collect really to go there. It's really only conducive if you're an expert, which isn't great. For example, we get a lot of requests for better value tracking, portfolio tracking. I don't really do this, but a lot of people use it as their like stock market, like Schwab. They load up the Set Registry inventory and what are my cards worth? They want more insight into that. Better set creation tools. Like right now you do set requests, you have to have 5 matching certs. You have to send it. A wonderful woman named Cassetta Robbins manually creates the sets. She's amazing. That's, I feel bad for her. She has a backlog. We actually took the option to set requests down because she has so many requests. So we have to come up with a more automated way to be like, oh, I want to collect whatever, the Larry Bird basic top set. And then if it doesn't exist, it just automatically creates. Now, it wouldn't have the weighting and the ranks and everything, but, or the ratings. But I mean, that's something that you in theory could automate. So we've got a lot to build on the Set Registry, but it's, despite all of its issues, it continues to grow. We have over 10,000 people every day log in and manage a set, which is crazy to think about. The Set Registry Awards at the National were awesome. We're going to have it be even better in Cleveland, with special prize. Like some of the sets that people have pulled off is pretty cool. That's the best part.
Impressive is not even a word that.
It's incredible. Yeah, like some of the one that stands out to me was the hockey sets from last year. Anyway, one thing I was going to mention on the Set Registry, another thing we get asked for a lot is the inclusion of other grading companies. Is something we've thought about, like be able to add SGC, which we're considering. But you can kind of do that, but we want it to be a lesser rank, because we didn't grade the card. But yeah, it's some really cool stuff that we've got planned. So.
I've long advocated for, as much as I love the Set Registry, a universal type Set Registry where you can do that. I think it'd have to be done independently of the card grading company. Yeah. But let me ask you this, because I'm also a huge autograph guy and Hall of Fame autographs, and I use the registry for that. Is there any talk about, I have to switch sides, I have to go over to the PSA DNA side, right? Yeah. And it's a little more clunky than the PSA side, it feels like.
Totally. Yeah.
And it's like, is there a point where that's going to start? They're going to talk to each other better, and it'll be a little bit more cohesive system.
Yeah, we have an issue right now where like the DNA cert numbers are overlapping with PSA cert numbers recently, and it's really annoying for everyone. Yeah, I mean, we have so many things that we have on our list to fix and build, and that's unfortunately not number 1, 2, or 3. Set Registry is one of those. The online submission center is one of those, which is really cool. I don't know if you saw, we just launched, like you have these example images now when you're choosing what card to submit.
Yeah. And
then fixing pop reports is actually the number 3 one. Because like search is broken right now. Like if you want to search for vintage, it works, but for like a modern card, it literally won't even, like you search 2012 Prism, it'll return like 1997 Upper Deck. Like it doesn't make any sense. So we're fixing, even though those sets exist in the pop. So yeah, yes is the answer, but not, I wish it could be sooner. We just don't have enough people to fix everything at once. So
well, the next question is totally self-serving. I submit way more items through PSA DNA for authentication, grading, all that. And the fact that I go to the PSA and I'm submitting cards and it's super easy, right? Boom, boom, boom. I still have to fill out a bloody
No,
form.
I know. That's probably a top 10 thing for us for sure. Like it's on the list. We're going to get to it. The guy who runs PSA DNA for us, his name's Steve Stent, who's great, and with Kevin Keaton, our lead authenticator, and that is absolutely number one on their list for us meaning the tech team, product team. And it's just, again, like we got to fix that registry first. Like I can't take more emails of people. Like I have more people yelling at me for that than I do the PSA DNA online submission center,
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
I get you. I mean, every company has to prioritize things. There's just there's only so much resources, so much time in a day, right, to do stuff. But that's just something near and dear to me. I have a stack of about 80 cards I'm about to send to PSA.
I'll tell you, I'm not. This is it just needs to be said. A lot of our submitters to PSA DNA, actually, I'm not using this as an excuse again, but like if we introduced the online center, they'd actually prefer paper. They're so old school. So we did some surveys of some of these folks, and they're like, actually, the paper's fine. And we're like, oh, okay.
At least make the form where you can fit what you're typing.
I know.
The
so
form.
the description box is too.
Yeah.
Old. I know.
It's like, wait a second, how am I supposed to? Anyway,
I've been there too. I know. Yeah.
Put that in the suggestion box right there.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to show you two cards and I want to talk about them.
Okay.
This is a 1940 play ball Chuck Klein.
Yeah.
Okay, and a 6. And then a 1940 play ball Honus Wagner.
Nice.
And a 2. These don't look right. Like this one looks, sorry. The Klein.
Yeah, it's mirrored.
Nice frosted edge, right? And then I've got my cellophane
Mylar
sandwich bag that the card is in.
Yeah, those are called Mylar sheets. Yeah,
I know they are. I just teasing. Why the difference, and why can't that just?
Will you hold them up again real quick?
Sure.
Side by side? Yeah.
So the Klein's the way I think a lot of us
I much prefer that. Yeah.
Right. Versus.
I was just looking at the sizing. So usually we put the sheets on cards that aren't perfectly fit inside the rails, but the Wagner looks like it does.
It does.
Yeah, so I'm not fully sure. Usually, though, we put them in there for one of two reasons. One, to prevent sliding, again, when the rails don't fit. And the other reason, if it's really high value and we're worried for some reason of it scratching against the plastic, which can happen if the card is not perfectly flat. It's one of those two reasons. But look, I mean, our new holder, we have some really cool holders coming out. That's something we've been spending a lot of time on. Thankfully, you don't need software engineers to work on new holders. We've got some really cool holders coming for those, for like, think of them as like non 2.5 by 3.5 cards, like Goudies, play balls, 75 minis, all the tobacco cards, pre-war stuff. And they're basically leverage a custom insert, where what we do is we take a picture of the card when it comes in. And by the time the card's finished grading, we've actually 3D printed the holder for that, the insert, the internal, like the outside's the same, the dimensions, everything, the frosting, but the inside rails are custom cut to the exact size of that card.
That's pretty cool. I have a lot of cards to send in for.
Yeah. And that's so basically it was something I pushed hard for, is like, I have 75 minis that are in where the rails are like in the 52 tops holders, and they're, and it's because the card was slightly oversized, and it can't fit within the mini holder. We have 50 some odd different holders, and we basically said, screw it. We're just going to have a custom print one every time, instead of keeping thousands of 50 different holders and making the sealer decide which one. It's too complicated. So yeah. Yeah.
I got a 71 tops yesterday I like your term, rails, with the rails for obviously a 52, 53, right? Over a bigger.
It's probably because the car was slightly big.
Right. But it just looks aesthetically, it's annoying. I mean, it doesn't look.
I couldn't agree more. I like uniformity. Like I have, I have sets around me here that like some the slightly thicker cards, like they're maybe 40-point card.
Yeah.
Like I'll have half of them will be in a regular holder, and then half will be, and it drives me crazy.
I like the same thing. I have the same thing.
Imagine the team when I get one of those orders back, like. And so we have a lot of stuff coming on consistency of holdering as well. Like we have computer screens now that show, like the sealers, you really have to leave it up to them. Like you don't want them jamming an oversized card into a holder, right? So they have complete discretion currently, and that's fine. They should. But, with this custom concept, the system really should it should be foolproof. Like there shouldn't be any inconsistency. Like some sealers are more conservative than others. And that is, like if you had I always ask, like, when did you sub the two different ones? Like, was that the same order?
No, but I used lighthouse holders just to, at least I was in the right generation of holder, No, they're way off.
If it wasn't the same order, then two different people sealed it most likely. So,
right.
Again, our team is very conservative generally. Like we prioritize card safety overall and, over aesthetics for sure. Right. And so I'm sure that's what it was, but yeah, like I said, we've got some really cool stuff coming there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I have two final hobby related questions just to ask you, and then I'll let you go. The first one is I get so many people, man, I'm just back in the hobby that watch the show, or I've been in, obviously pandemic was a huge opportunity for people to join in the hobby. And so many of them ask me, where to start. And I would ask you, if you're talking to a new collector, and let's say they like vintage baseball, let's say that's their jam, what advice would you give that person?
Ignore values and like all the hype stuff. Like start low grade. Collect the set you like. I always tell people, like, what's your birth year? What's the card you remember, as a kid? Like, who's your favorite player? And like try and narrow down to one set. I try and push people down the set collecting route just because I found that to be the most rewarding. Although like newer folks, I've been pushing them more on the players too. Just like I have a friend who really loves Jackie Robinson. She's trying to do a PSA 2, PSA 5 of a 48 leaf is pretty damn expensive.
Right,
so,
right.
She's doing like PSA 2 through 5 of, 58 through 50. I think she's doing Bowman as well. I'm trying to remember.
48 through 56 are his.
Yeah. No, I know, but I'm trying to remember if she's doing Bowman as well or just tops. I know she's doing the 48 leaf, 49 Bowman. I'm trying to remember if she's doing 50. Yeah, but anyway, so she's doing basically every Jackie card in a 2 through 6. And I think that's really cool to do Jackie, a player set, because it's only like 10 or 15 cards.
It's a good one.
And like that's where I would start is, pick your favorite player, pick your favorite set, start relatively low grade. You get comfortable with it, do the set registry. And, as you gain more confidence in like spotting pricing, like I always say, like download Card Ladder or VCP or whatever, Beckett's great. PSA Magazine's great. But like for the price guide, you really want to use one of the real-time software tools. And as you get more comfortable with like, okay, like not every PSA 6 is the same. What do you care about? Do you care about centering? Like you got to teach about qualifiers. Like, I had a friend the other day, he's so excited about a PSA 9 Gretzky, but it turned out it was a 9OC. I'm like, oh, like,
yeah.
Great. You got a 6. Congrats. So I don't know. I think that's where I would probably, tell folks.
It's so funny because the hardest thing is what should I collect? I don't know. What do you like? Right. And don't listen to me. Don't just do what you like. I can give you some advice because there's so much nuance. Like you said, knowing what an OC qualifier is, for example, that's a nuance that's kind of universal. You need to know what that is.
Yeah. They figure it out. They learn by mistakes usually, right?
Oh I have plenty of them in my closet right over here. And you have them behind you, you said.
I definitely don't tell people to grade initially. Like grading to me is like, I would love you to as the head of collectors, but grading is one more step, Yeah,
that's a different level to start.
It's like usually if you have a vintage card and it's not graded, there's usually a reason.
That's right.
Yeah.
At this point, right?
At this point, yeah. I'm like, there's plenty. Like, we saw a raw set earlier this week last week, 58. I think I posted on Instagram like a 58 tops. Is beautiful, but like no card was higher than maybe a 7, but like centered, like bunch of 5s and like beautiful, like never seen the light of day in 50 years, like. So they are out there, but you're going to get taken. Start with start with graded cards if you're new.
Yeah, buying graded, but don't submit them yourself because
don't buy raw and submit them until you're much more knowledgeable,
seasoned. Yes, for sure. First, before we get to the last question, I got to see the Aaron, the rookie.
Oh yeah.
Aaron rookie.
Yeah.
One of my favorite cards is the Aaron rookie.
Yeah.
It was one of the first big first big card I bought was a Gehrig 33 Gaudy.
Yeah.
And then the Aaron rookie was like
okay.
The next
well,
one.
Before I show you that, here's the box, 54 tops.
Okay, you might as well have one of those. Sure.
Unopened, 36 packs. Freaking awesome.
That's nickel packs too, I think.
Yeah. And I think they have the 54 variation on the front. I'm not 100%. I remember I saw it opened at the National with okay. Before that, here's the Ernie Banks.
Oh, in a 10. All right.
Yeah. Ernie Banks 10, 54 tops. And here's the Aaron 54 tops 10.
Oh, what
Yeah.
a gorgeous.
And people they're rough cut. And I posted on Twitter or something. They're like, that's a 4, because they see the look at the chipping. But
Right.
and it reminds me of the OPG with the frayed it. There's nothing more beautiful than a rough cut 54 or a 71 OPG Nolan or 79 Gretzky with the frayed edges. There's nothing more fresh than those. If they're straight, you got issues.
Yeah, that would worry you more than the rough edge. That's cool. A beauty. And the great thing I want people to hear as I say this to Nat is I have a PSA 3 in that card, and I love it.
Yeah,
and
great. Yeah, totally.
The whole spectrum is finding that balance between what you can afford, what you like.
Yeah.
And all cards are gorgeous, and we'd all love 10s, and that's so cool. You have one.
Well, just so you know, when I bought this card, I haven't really ever said this. I spent, which is reckless. This is before was it before I had kids? I think I spent half of the money I had on this card.
Okay.
So and I just got married. That's how my point is I wanted it so badly that I was just screw it. I'm basically all in.
Right.
And that could have gone badly. Had I bought a 9, 2 years ago, it'd be worth half as much. But yeah, I could not agree more. Pick the grade you want, have conviction about it. If it goes down 90%, it shouldn't matter. You should get a smile on your face when you look at it. But
yeah, that's the whole point. And I think that is true for most vintage guys. They just want a nice example of the card of whatever.
Doesn't matter. 3, 4
criteria matters to them, right? Last question. What are you most excited about in terms of the future? The hobby's been through this craziness, right? The last few years. What excites you about the future of the hobby in general?
Yeah, look, I think the hobby's in a weird place right now. I think you got these issues with the hobby's really 2 different things. You have the true kind of vintage collectors, and there's, I guess, the third, which is the modern, 90s, early 2000s. Then you have these ultra modern. And I think we have a little bit of an issue where the ultra moderns really become more of a gambling, speculative, the breakers, the prospecting on rookies and $100,000 for a Mac Jones 1 of 1. And, just nothing makes sense anymore on the ultra modern. And we're seeing a forest fire a bit, clearing out some of the potentially necessary bad things and meaning secondary prices have really come down on these ultra modern cards. And I think it's actually an exciting thing in that it's like a forest fire. The green shoots or whatever are going to start popping up, and they have been, with set collecting and 90s and vintage, and the real stable foundation of this hobby is basically still there and is coming back stronger, despite all of these shenanigans with, overproduction and multiple 1 of 1s and, players signing cards that actually their brother signed them. And there's just so much crap that drives me crazy. And I just don't collect it. And, but look, it's a huge part of our business at PSA. I'm not saying people shouldn't collect it. It's just not for me. And, that's fine. But yeah, the exciting part is the how stable the vintage and set collecting has really been. Look at some of the prices on Heritage and Golden and Memory Lane and REA and, full sets, even people selling full sets. You're seeing really solid prices.
Yeah, I tried to get a 33 DeLong Gehrig in the last REA auction. And I was probably the underbidder, and I was just yeah, I'm good here. If it goes for more than that, congrats to the guy who got it or girl who got it. it's got they're the good stuff is still selling for good prices. That's I guess what I'm saying.
I got blown out of the water on that Mantle white letters, by the way. If you remember the 9 that sold,
I do.
Yeah, like
I have a Mantle white letter and a 5.
It's awesome card.
And I paid like $300 for it, $200 for it.
Yeah.
Like, and it's way more now, but it's
freaking awesome card.
There's just cards that are kind of universal, right? And I think people sticking with those are smart. But like again, don't listen to us. I mean, we're giving you some basic.
Yeah.
Buy what you want, you know?
Yeah. And again, I think that if you remove the gambling aspect, I think you see true collecting. I don't think the gambling thing is true collecting. I think it's what it is. I think it's like it's appealing to the sports bettors. And I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just, it's not collecting. It's something different. And it's fine, you know, but it's just, like I'd rather have dinner with a bunch of, true collectors than a bunch of, they probably never even seen their cards. You know what I mean?
Or they certainly don't know who the players are, or
no, I'm sure they do, and they're frantically checking box scores. I mean, I say this like I bought a bunch of LeBron cards and hoped that he had a great career, and so I'm somewhat two-faced by saying all this, but I've been turned off by the how much off the deep end it's gone with people have lost a lot of money, and it's America. You make your own decisions, right? But you can't only blame yourself when you lose $100,000 on a Mac Jones 1-of-1 that you bought. But the fact that that's propagated and pushed, is not helpful in my opinion. So,
well, Nat, you've been more than generous with your time. I really appreciate you coming on and just having a little fun talking about cards. Thanks for showing your stuff and sharing your thoughts. I really appreciate it.
Of course, thanks for having me.
All right, guys. I'm back, so I've got some great episodes lined up, conversations with some great hobbyists. We'll talk to you guys soon. Merry Christmas, everybody, and keep collecting.